Buenos dias, Martin, and thank you for joining us today at Business Spotlight Series. Today, I'm excited to introduce Martin Greig, founder and editorial director of BackPage, a sports publisher and content company. Welcome, Martin.
Buenos dias, Javier. Thank you very much for having me today.
Buenos dias, very good accent, I have to say. You've just been in Madrid, right? So that's why it's
Exactly.
fresh. It's fresh. Well done. Martin, tell us, how did you end up doing what you are doing? Is this something you wanted to do when you were a child, or how did you come up with the idea of running the business?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when I was growing up, probably getting into my mid to late teens, when I started to think about what profession I might go into, I was more interested in traditional journalism. So that was really where I moved into when I started working. I did a degree in literature and then a postgraduate degree in journalism, and then got my first job as a paid sports journalist in around about 2000, 2001. So my roots are in traditional journalism, and worked as a sports journalist for about 10 years. Before that evolved into BackPage. The company, I suppose, is many things. We started off as a traditional book publisher, and we also produce podcasts. And now probably the growing part of our business is editorial services. So we work with a range of organizations and brands and athletes to help them to tell their stories. So from that point of view, it feels like quite a natural evolution from where we started in traditional journalism.
Brilliant. And tell us, how do you come up with the name?
Yeah, so obviously in Britain, the sports stories appear on the back page of a newspaper. So it really was as simple as that. We come up with this back page as the brand, which speaks to the sports content side of it. And yeah, we incorporated the company as Backpage Press, but we really just refer to ourselves as Backpage these days.
Yeah, very good. Obviously, you've been around for a number of years. How did COVID affect your industry and your business specifically?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. COVID, I think, in terms of the publishing side of the business, book sales actually increased during COVID, pretty much across the board, and we found that as well. We found a real spike in our book sales, and from the perspective of podcast production, what actually happened was we began remote recording, so the podcast that we produced moved online, and we had to learn all the ins and outs of Zoom and Teams and all these different platforms, and just work as hard as possible to elevate the audio quality for these recordings. So we managed to do that relatively successfully, and we were able to continue to produce at the level we were before. So really, in material terms, like, COVID didn't have much of a negative impact on our company. I think probably the introduction of remote working has been the lasting impact for us. We probably do a lot more Zoom calls and team calls, and
Yes.
Talking to writers and people that we work with than we did before. We probably wouldn't have thought of jumping on a Skype call 6 or 7 years ago and talking to somebody the way that we would do now, jumping on a Zoom call. So I think I always prefer in person. I much prefer meeting people face to face. But I think as a halfway house, remote working in terms of Zoom and Teams is a really good kind of halfway house compromise.
Brilliant. So tell us a little bit about what you do on a day-to-day, Martin, in the business.
Yeah, that's a good question, because it varies every day. I mean, we do, I think I mentioned before, increasingly, rather than taking on huge book projects which can last 6, 9, 12 months, we do we work more for other people now, so we offer editorial services to a range of companies. Just before we started recording, we were talking about the Laureus World Sport Awards in Madrid. So for that event, we traveled to Madrid and we were producing content for Laureus for their in-house, and we were sitting down with 12, 13, 14 different athletes across 3 or 4 days and doing, set piece interviews, filmed, and those interviews would run across the Laureus channels and social media and their in-house television program. So stuff like that. We do quite a lot of work for organizations like that. Again, coming back to the core skills we discussed previously, the traditional journalism of going out and speaking to people and finding out interesting stories and relating them in as entertaining a way as possible. So essentially that is still what we're doing, but in a slightly different form now.
Yes. You put on your website, we tell world-class sports stories. Does any particular story come up to mind, that is you want to share here that made a splash, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, there's two. The first book that really made our name as a company was on FC Barcelona, written by a Spanish-based, Barcelona-based journalist called Graham Hunter. And that was telling the story of Pep Guardiola's great Barcelona team from 2008 to 2012. And we felt that there was a story that deserved to be told, a world-class story that deserved to be told. And we enlisted Graham to write that book. And that book went around the world. We were amazed by the impact. It sold 50,000 copies. It was translated into 13 different languages. And it was eventually made into a film by a documentary film by Universal Studios. So that was a huge story for us. It took us out of Scotland as well, although we're very proud to have our base in Scotland. We always wanted to move beyond the borders, and that was a story that really took us into much bigger marketplaces.
Brilliant, fantastic. How do you see the industry shaping in the next 5 to 10 years?
In terms of publishing, podcasting, like media industry in general?
Yes, media industry in general, yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what we found is the industry moves very, very quickly now. And it's quite hard to storytell within that, because if you're telling a story in real time, then by 7 days' time or 7 weeks' time or 7 months' time, that story could be forgotten about and it's completely moved on to something else. So it's quite hard to tell stories off the back of the rolling news cycle, because the rolling news cycle is so fast these days. So that's a real challenge to storytellers like ourselves. Part of how we get around that is some of the projects that we take on. I guess you would class them as early nostalgia. So we produced a book on Arrigo Sacchi's great AC Milan team from the late 80s. And that book told the story of that era, which is an era that is very fondly remembered for football fans of that generation. So for us, it's kind of safer to take on a story like that, that is already has its place in time, rather than trying to come off the back of something that's happening right now and perhaps not find an audience for it. So I think it's a real challenge for storytellers, the pace of which things move these days, and trying to tell the stories that are going to stand the test of time.
So on that line, how do you go about producing content? Because you could write about anything really in that space. So how do you go about what content you write?
Yeah, I mean, every project we take on is usually years in the making. We discuss everything at length before we commit to anything. So you have to go through a very rigorous process, I think.
Imagine, yeah.
In terms of these kind of longer term projects, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a book, you have to be very judicious with the choice of subject. So yeah, it's a fairly rigorous process in terms of these kind of projects. If we are offering editorial services to companies, then we'll just respond to events. So if they want us to go and interview someone at a set location, then we'll go and do that and do the research and make sure we're well prepared and deliver what they require. So yeah, it's kind of the two different sides of the business, I guess.
What type of stories do you love writing about?
That's a good question. I think the stories that we enjoy are the stories that have meant something to us. And going back to the Barcelona book, for example, that was a team that meant a lot to us, and we felt there was a story that should be told. So yeah, I think like, personal bias is a big part of it. Is like the stories that chime with us emotionally.
Yes.
I think it all comes back to the quality of the story, the quality of the content. I mean, our biggest book to date is the autobiography of Andrea Pirlo, who's currently looking over my shoulder, as you can see. So that was a book that came out in Italian, and we bought the English language rights to it and had it translated. But the beauty of that book was that it was unlike any other autobiography we'd read before. It was a very unique voice, and we published that book because we loved the voice that had been captured in that book as much as we loved Andrea Pirlo, the footballer. So yeah, I think we have to, particularly with these lengthier projects, we have to work on stuff that we are passionate about, or we simply wouldn't have the stamina to get through them.
Yes. On that note, which one is your favorite book? Do you have one?
That's a really tough question. I think possibly a book which maybe hasn't sold as many as some of our other books, but it's a book on the Spain national team by the same author as the Barcelona book. And I think that was maybe our fourth or fifth book that we published. And I think we had learned a lot of lessons from the first 3 or 4 books, and we were just better at our jobs, and we worked that book harder. We were more in sync with the writer, and I think it just made for a better end product. And yeah, it's a book I'm really proud of, and it felt like a real step forward in terms of the level of editorial that we brought to ourselves. And as I say, it's not been as commercially successful as some of the other books, but it's a book I'm really proud of.
Yeah, brilliant. And who is your favorite player?
Wow, these are hard questions, Javi. Yeah, I think when I think back to the great players over the last 25 years, I go back to that great Barcelona team of Iniesta, Xavi, Messi, and the rest. I think the obvious answer would be Messi, but I think I would say Xavi. Xavi, to me, in some ways, feels underrated. I think he's in the top 5 players of all time. I think he completely redefined that position, and he was a player that I just immediately related to. when I saw him. So yeah, I'll go for Xavi Hernandez.
Well done. I like it. It's got the same name as me, but in Catalan. So there you go. So Martin, how do you see the business BackPage developing, growing in the next 5 years? What are the aspirations for the business?
Yeah, it's another good question. I think probably the way the business has evolved over the last 2 or 3 years has been moving away from these bigger projects and into more working with other organizations and brands and athletes. And um, I think that evolution reflects probably our journalistic background, where there's a bit more immediacy, and you're turning around things quicker and getting them into the world quicker. It can be quite emotionally challenging to work on a project for 9 months, and wait for the reaction when it finally gets in the world. It's also financially challenging as well, because you're really rolling the dice with every project. You're rolling the dice with the subject of the book, with every book that you publish, particularly with today's economic situation, where publishing books is harder. So yeah, I think we're sort of moving more towards kind of working with other people rather than the organic projects. Although we will still keep some of that in the company, but yeah, maybe more towards working with other people.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And what would you say to anyone thinking of going into business? Obviously, before you set up your own business, you had a paid job, I guess, and then you took the decision to run your own business. What would you say to people who are at the moment considering, leaving employment to run their own business?
I think most people start a business because they're passionate about the area, and that was certainly the reason that we started the business, because we were creative people and we wanted to try and tell powerful stories in the world. But I think the real challenge is to try and learn more of the business side of it. I mean, I have to say I was completely ignorant of business before I started the business, and that has been the biggest challenge, is coming to terms with the business side of the business. I'd say from financial point of view, even being on top of all the things that you have to be, whether that's cash flows, VAT returns, all that sort of stuff, has been a huge challenge. So I would say if anyone's starting a business, then they should try and get some help. Now that's difficult depending on how much money you have when you start off the company. Sometimes you have to grow it to the point where you can actually get somebody in to help you out. But I would say if you can try and bring some knowledge of the how to run the finances of a business is essential. And I think some understanding of business strategy as well. That's not an area that we were strong in, and I would say it's probably in the last 3 or 4 years that we've really kind of cracked that nut, and the business has really grown as a result. So whether that means doing a full-blown business degree, I don't necessarily say that, but I think if people can try to give as much attention to the business side of the business as the creative side of the business, then I think that would save them a lot of time in the future.
Yeah, I don't know if you've read the book, The E-Myth. Have you read the E-Myth? Why most small businesses fail and why? And it talks about the technician. When you start a business, you do what you do well. So you're a technician, but you don't know much about business, as you were mentioning, finance, cash flow, business strategy. You are just fixing sockets or fixing pipes or writing, if you like. And it's a great book for those people who want to start a business to read, really. It's the blueprint to build a business. So great insight. Thanks for that. Yeah. What would you say, Martin? What would you say to your what piece of advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
That's a good question. I mean, it's hard to going back to that point in time. You know, from the choices that I made from age 18 professionally, I don't look back with any regrets. Like, you know, I studied a literature degree and I loved it. I really enjoyed doing journalism. The jobs that I worked in journalism were enormously fulfilling and gave me a really great grounding for going into business. I think like the work that we've been doing in the company for the past 10, 15 years has definitely been, it's felt like everything that went before kind of led up to that point. And it's definitely been the best thing professionally I've ever done. So I'll kind of refer you to my previous answer. You know, I think if I was an 18-year-old, I would try and get an understanding of the rudiments of business, which would hopefully stand me in better stead when, you know, the day came to start BackPage.
Yeah, yeah. I think there was the international speaker Jim Rohn who said your business will grow as much as you grow. So yeah,
good quote. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, brilliant. If you could have a superpower, what would you go for?
A superpower. Goodness me, that's a good question. Have you? I mean, it's hard to tell. It's, I suppose, the biggest challenge for our company is trying to predict the future. The media landscape is changing so dramatically. I mean, since we first published a book in 2010 to now, that industry has changed out of all recognition, I would say. Since we first produced a podcast in 2015, I think that industry has changed dramatically as well. So I think the biggest challenge for us is to try and be ahead of the curve. So yeah, I think some kind of crystal ball stargazing superpower where we could try and be ahead of other people with regards to where the industry might be moving. I think that would be my superpower.
That would be a great one, definitely. And if you could live a day in the life of, who would you choose? It doesn't have to be a living person, could be somebody from the past.
A day in the life. Wow. So I mean, it's another great question. I think one of the when I think back to some of the people who have been influential in terms of the last 10, 15 years of the company, most of them I've never met and are never likely to meet. And it's through, you know, reading books. Probably one of the most influential books stroke podcast has been Tim Ferriss. I'm a big fan of Tim Ferriss, and his book, The 4 Hour Workweek, was very influential, kind of built around the 80-20 principle.
Yes.
And I think the learnings from that in terms of time management were massively influential in terms of where we expended our energies, you know, as business owners. So that's really driven a lot of our kind of time management techniques, I would say. I think he's a really interesting person, Tim Ferriss. Like if I was doing like a kind of dream dinner table, I think he would probably be at it. So yeah, I think I would quite like to see life through his eyes for 24 hours and the decisions that he makes and the experiences that he has would be very interesting, I think.
Brilliant. I love that. Excellent. So just to wrap up, is there any news you want to share with those people watching the recording, things that are coming up you want to share with us?
I don't think there's any kind of big news announcements from our end. I think as a company, I think we're at the point now where like we want to grow, and I think like every company says that, it's just a business cliche, and if you ask people that question, they'll probably say, oh, I want to 2x my turnover or whatever. But I do feel that we're at the point now where like we have a lot of business knowledge as well as creative knowledge, and we're probably in quite a good place to scale. We've got one idea in particular that we think is a really, really big idea and would probably require some startup funding, and would be an idea that would potentially transform the company. It wouldn't be a 2 times turnover idea. It would be much bigger than that. So I think our ambitions is to use all our business and creative powers that we've built up over the last 15 years and really try and take the company, to a far different level than it is just now.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, sounds very exciting plans ahead, Martin. I'm wishing you all the luck with that. And well, I just want to say that thank you for taking part in the Business Spotlight and sharing your journey with us today. Thank you so much, Martin.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Adiós, amigo.
Adios.